Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney, and today we are diving back in to the power of storytelling. But this time, we're going to be focused on storytelling specifically for sales or for client presentations, because that seems to be the area that gets the most traction when people are interested in getting better at storytelling, right? Because there's a direct result. If I get better at this, will I improve our bottom line? Will I improve my bottom line? Will I get more sales? Will I get more engagement from clients? Will I get more buy-in? While I also strongly believe that storytelling is very valuable when it comes to engaging employees, selling your ideas or your goals or your vision to the folks that you work with, it's also probably most asked for in the area of sales. So we're going to focus on that a little bit today. One of my producers, Tatiana Dominguez, will probably jump in here or there, but we're going to focus on why storytelling matters and why it matters specifically in sales or client presentations. So one is, if you listen to the last episode, and Tatiana's going to tell me what number the last episode, we have a couple on storytelling. She'll tell me which episode. So if you want to listen to those first, just to get the overall gist, you can. I strongly encourage it. They're great. But why storytelling matters in sales is that probably the first and foremost thing, and we've said this before, but it's Jennifer Aker out of Stanford University says it is 22 times more powerful than data alone. So it doesn't mean you don't give your data, because salespeople and companies love their data. They love to say, we've changed people this much, or if you sign up for our programs, or if you take our products, this is how much more value you'll get. Those things are still important. It's just if you add the story beforehand, it becomes even more, 22 times more powerful. So that's probably the number one reason that I always quote. The second thing is it engages clients emotionally and makes information more memorable. It builds trust, rapport with your prospects, which obviously we know rapport is really important to build quickly, and story is a great way to do that. And it kind of differentiates your solutions from competitors, and then also can simplify like really complex ideas and make them very relatable quickly, because you don't have that much time to win somebody over or to lose somebody. And so a story can be powerful in how you do that. And it can be done in a more formal way, like a presentation, or it can be done, hanging around having a drink with somebody who's an important client. I'll tell you a story, because this is a storytelling one. It seems like it. But we try to talk to people all the time about how your managers or your up and coming managers need leadership training, right? And that can be a tough sell, because a lot of times people who run their departments or run businesses learned it on their own the hard way. And they believe in their heart that everybody kind of can learn that way. And sure, some people can, but it can be done a lot faster and easier if they have some sort of training on it. So I find myself constantly in the position of convincing people, like, why make it so difficult for them? These folks that are up and coming leaders in your organization, you should invest in and give them some sort of training to make it easier for them, but to make it easier on all the other employees that they deal with as they move up the ladder. And one of the things we work on with them is emotional intelligence. And some people will say, well, why is that important to learn? Like, what does that actually mean? Can you learn that? Aren't you just born with it? And I will say that it is absolutely critical in terms of being able to self-reflect. And one of the things that happened to me years ago, we were under investigation. Imagine, like, so scary, under investigation. And the city, the Department of Investigations came and had to pull us in, and we had to go through an interview with their lawyers. And I had to do it because I was the person in charge of these programs. And while I knew that we had done nothing wrong, I still get incredibly nervous around authority figures. Like, you take me to jury duty and I start crying as soon as I have to go up in front of the judge. Even though I am not the person on trial, I'm just in, voir dire. I feel guilty. Like, I immediately get nervous around authority. I don't know what happens. I'm like, become a 7-year-old girl again. But so I'm going up in this to talk to these lawyers with the city, with the Department of Investigations. And I'm nervous as heck, as if I was so guilty, and I wasn't, but I could feel my heart racing. I could feel my brain going. And at this point, I was not running the company, but I thought, oh my, I'm the one who has to hold everybody on my back here. And while I had a lot of responsibility at the company, it fell on my shoulders to handle this particular issue. And it was a lot, right? And I could feel when I was in there how nervous I was getting. I was sweating. I thought, my God, I probably seem so guilty. Like I'm practically crying at her questions. And so I just could feel, as I could feel my heart racing, I thought to myself, okay, Christine, this is exactly what we teach. This is not the moment that you should be engaged in this conversation when this is happening all inside of my body. And so I just said, can I use the restroom real quick? And she said, sure. And I left and I went into the restroom of this like city building. I checked underneath all the stalls really quickly. Nobody was in there. And I quickly did like 10 jumping jacks to get the nerves out of my body. And I took 5 deep breaths, just like we teach when we do the emotional intelligence work. I took 5 deep breaths. I looked myself in the mirror like I've never looked in the mirror. And I was like, you've got this. You know what you're doing. You're a good person. You did nothing wrong. Just breathe and go back in there. And I took a deep breath again, let out a big sigh. I could feel my heart rate coming back down. I thought, okay, I'm ready. And I went back in there and I was focused and I was clear-headed. I was calmer. And then I handled that meeting. And then all of a sudden, these months of investigation was over. And she was like, thank you very much. And the next day we got notice that the case had been dropped. But boy, what responsibility was on my shoulders as a, director level person that I had to handle in that moment. And I was so grateful for that kind of emotional intelligence and mindfulness and breath work that I had worked on as I was getting my leadership training. Okay, so now if I tell that story and with this is what we can see that how it improves people's lives, or this is how it can save your company in moments like this, what has immediately happened is that hopefully if I've done a good job with that story, and I probably took a little bit longer in this example than I would with a customer because I wouldn't have that much time, or with a presentation, is that hopefully they're feeling the nervousness that I was feeling. Hopefully their brain is opening up, because if you think about it, what happens to the brain, there's a lot of hormones that are released in the brain when storytelling happens, right? So it releases some dopamine. So hopefully if I'm telling the story right, you're getting a little dopamine hit where it enhances focus and emotional connection to me. So now you are one with me as if this was your story. And now we are on the same side of the table looking at this nervousness of this situation that I was in, and then going to the bathroom, right? And having to check under the stalls. Like people know that moment of like, oh, am I alone? Can I have this moment alone? And it creates this shared experience between me and hopefully the person that I'm talking to, and releases a little bit of oxytocin. And that oxytocin hormone helps build trust and empathy between us. It's a trust hormone that is released during storytelling. So because I'm telling you of a vulnerable moment for me, not one where I was awesome and everything went well, but a vulnerable moment for me where I had to overcome something, you now feel that, and you create, because you're human, you create some oxytocin release that makes you want to trust and listen to me. So now when I start to talk to you about how important it is to train all of your leadership so that if they ever get in any situation, they can handle it in a calm, focused way, that's much more powerful than if I just tried to convince you of that fact without that story. So anyway, that's one example, and a couple of the things that happen in the brain when this happens. So oxytocin, dopamine, right? It influences decision-making, because what we find is that people, contrary to popular belief, people make decisions based on emotion rather than reasoning. Let me say that again. People make decisions based on emotion rather than reasoning. So we think we do it the opposite way. We think that we make decisions on reasoning, but that is not true. And they hooked up people to fMRI machines, and they could see the moment of decision comes way deeper in the brain, in the emotional centers, where they want to buy this based on something emotional. And then we use reasoning or our prefrontal cortex to make ourselves feel good about that decision. So we make the decision, and then we have to find the data or the practicality, like this is the right cost, or they have the right research behind them, or they've worked with the right other clients that are similar to ours. That reasoning helps us feel better about the decision that we've already made in our gut. So if you can do that for your clients or for your potential clients, that can really make the sales process a lot easier for you. So there's a couple things that you can do to get people good at this, because it's natural in the sense that we're all human and we tell stories. We've been telling stories around the fire since the beginning of humankind, but it's not so normal for us to practice it in the workplace. So there's a couple things. One is, I would say 100% start with a story arsenal for yourself. So I just have an ongoing list of interesting things that happen to me and interesting things that happen either at work or in my personal life. And to tell you the truth, it doesn't matter which thing it is, because personal things that happen to you can make great work examples and vice versa. It's just easier if you think to yourself, I need to also have some work stories. It's also easier for your folks to start practicing it if you start thinking about what are some work stories that happen. And the best way to do that is to think about, not only to make that story arsenal, but to start to think about what are some success stories with our clients. Who are the clients that have made change because of our product or service? And can I tell their story? So instead of making you or your company the focus of that story, rather make them the hero. So one of the most famous kind of archetypes in storytelling is the hero's journey. Right? A hero's journey means that there's some sort of pain point that this hero overcomes to some extent. And so with a hero's journey story with your clients, you want to tell the story about your client or your client's company by identifying kind of their pain point, describing the challenge that they faced. And then when it comes to the solution, you can explain how your product or service helped them in their journey, right? And then you could show the results and the impact of that. But really, it still has to be focused on them, and you're exalting them and how proud you are to have them as a partner because they overcame this. And you were one part of creating value for them that made this easier, because who's ever listening to it is putting themselves in the position of that person, that other client, and wants to also have that hero journey, because chances are they're struggling with something, or they could be doing something better in one part of their business, and you may just be the exact solution to help them have their own hero journey. Right? So one of the things you can do is not only have not only your salespeople, but everybody start to have a story arsenal of things, of their own stuff that happens, but also their clients. What do you start to notice with your clients? At your weekly meetings, and I hope you're having either weekly one-on-ones or you're having a weekly sales meeting, or maybe it's a monthly sales meeting, whatever those meetings are, you have some point in it where people are sharing client stories so that they don't always have to have their own client story, but I may borrow from somebody else's client story if I hear it. So even if you have folks that are your kind of hunter salespeople that are out there getting the leads, garnering the leads, finding the captures, you also have your typical farmer salespeople that are really working the accounts all the time. And those farmers tend to see the changes and the struggles that your clients are going through. And they are the perfect people to call this information from. So you want to have meetings where all those people are together, not only your typical hunter kind of salespeople, but also the people that are your account managers and so forth that are sharing stories of success, because then they can borrow from each other those really good stories. The other thing that'll happen is as you have your folks share their stories in a very comfortable way with each other, they start to get better at it. And you start to make them do it in 1 minute or less, or we're going to do a 2 minute or less story, and we'll just whip around and everybody will share one. And so then there's no pressure for this to be like the perfect story. It's just that every week there has to be something that people are sharing. And if they don't have something that happened to them this week, then they can go backwards in time, but they should be starting to be observant and notice what's happening with their clients. If they don't know those things, they can start with the clients that you know love them, that love the service, that love the product, and say with a couple of questions about why this is working for you. What have you had to overcome? What has been your struggle? And why does this provide value or help? And then those clients will start to give you that story. And if it's really good, you could say to them, do you mind if I just film you on my camera? I would love to include this in a testimonial, either on our website or a case study that we can use down the line. And if you want, I can change your name and I can change your company's name, but I'd love to get these insights. And you'd be surprised at how many people, if they have a real partnership with you and your company, will want to provide that for you because they also feel good about what they've overcome. So that's one thing that you can do. If you're doing a presentation in presentation form, just be sure you don't have a lot of words, because words equal data, right? They're important, but they can overwhelm our brains and we kind of tune out. So think about, what's my story that I could potentially tell, and then have some photos. Always use photos, even if they're stock images. It just allows people to imagine people in this situation. If you have your own photos, even better, because nothing will take a person out of a sales presentation than the fact that they saw that same stock photo in the last 3 presentations that came up in their office. And then they're like, oh my God, I just saw that. And now they're not listening to what you have to say. So if you can show that, new pictures of your own, even better. If you have pictures of the client and the client's people, even better. So like if we go in and do a workshop session with some company, when I'm going to send them a proposal next time, if I have pictures of them, I'm going to use that in the proposal rather than the normal pictures we use in the proposal. Because immediately then that proposal, that they're not going to see me tell it, I'm just sending them, they've just asked me to send it to them. I've sent them some pictures throughout that are them and their teams engaged or having fun or learning something. And that brings back an emotional connection to us. It's a little bit of oxytocin, right? That goes, oh, right, I remember that time. That was nice. And their emotional center is now engaged, not just their reasoning. And that's what you want to have. You want to have some emotional connection, like, oh, right, I remember when my team had that much fun. I want to give that to them again. Let me call Christine and see if they can come in and do something for us. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of example that can work. That's just a photograph even, but photographs are very powerful. If you're feeling very gutsy, use music too. Music is super powerful. And if you happen to know the kind of music that they like or that is personally inspiring to them, that music can be really helpful at certain moments in your presentation, like maybe before you start. But you have to feel out the right moment and know that it's the right thing for folks. So that's kind of a higher level tip. As I'm saying this, I'm also just going to ask Tatiana if there's things that you know that you've seen people do or a tip that you have as we go through it to help them. I know one that Tatiana would love is that not only between making storytelling as a habit with your team, right? So starting with quick success stories every time, but also building storytelling into like onboarding new employees. And it kind of helps new hires adopt that mindset from the beginning. You can also use AI to practice. So if you have your employees practice or record their sales pitch, and then use AI tools to kind of analyze for tone, for clarity, for engagement. And they can provide like structured feedback in their delivery. So it could be, oh, you know what? You need a call to action here. Try something like this. And then AI will give you one that's maybe a little corny or a little, staid. So you can make it better, but you'll know like, oh, okay, I need a call to action. I forgot one, or I need a hook here. And this AI can actually give you some suggestions onto that. But what also happens is then you have an arsenal in your AI tools of stories. So if you say to them, I can't remember, I need a story that helps pitch this. Do you remember one that I've used before? Chances are it'll come up with that, right? If you're interested in this, we have a storytelling playbook for sales and client presentations that I find really helpful. I reference it all the time when not only are we doing things, but we're training other people on how to do things. It's full of tips and techniques and things you could try with your team. So if you're interested in that, in the episode notes, we will have a link where you can go to and download that storytelling playbook. All right. So I think I went over those were some ideas of what happens in the brain, right? Remember, if you want to leverage it, think about imagery, emotion, adding a little tension. You want to have a relatable protagonist. So you don't want somebody that's just perfect, right? That's why even in the little story that I shared, I explained my very big imperfection of authority issues and getting nervous, right? So I set the stage with somebody, like in this case, myself, that was nervous, right? That was scared, that had this background, so that hopefully you could relate in some way to that imperfection. That's because we all have some imperfection. If not that, we have something else. And you also want to create a little bit of tension or suspense, or like the stakes are high if you can. And so if you think back to my story, that's why I shared it, because the stakes were very high for me in that moment. And so even though you don't even know all the particulars of the story, I didn't have to give all the background because I don't have time, right? People can get it kind of quickly and go with you. You want to keep it concise. So most stories need to be 3 minutes or under. If you're in a sales meeting, you need to practice a 1-minute story, a 2-minute version. You can spend 5 minutes if it's really worth it. Like if you tell that story and you can capture their attention for 5 minutes, that it will make a big difference, then there's a big payoff. Then it's worth 5 minutes. If not, you've got to start going, what's the 3-minute version of that? What's the 1-minute version? And it cannot sound too staged. It has to feel like it's authentic, right? Don't make up things. Figure out how to, you might have to embellish here or there but it needs to be real. It needs to be authentic. And you want to help the audience visualize what that feels like. You really focus not just on thinking, but on the feelings, because again, they make decisions based on feeling and emotion first. So that's what you want to focus on. You also want to adapt it to the audience. So think about where the audience is, who the audience is, and that will also help, because you want to, if you're selling to a certain kind of client, you want to give examples that are in that client's world. It'll make it a lot easier for you to be relatable. So that's why you're not going to have all the stories to use. I need to use sometimes Tatiana's stories or other folks who I work with. I need to hear their stories and be able to share their stories as well. That's why doing those story huddles or quick story whip arounds can be really helpful for an organization. If you're doing a presentation, also think about things like lighting or mood, right? Seating, how you have people seated. All of those things can create an experience for people, an emotional experience. Think about the way you move, right? When somebody is a powerful speaker, let's say like Tony Robbins, when he does his presentations to hundreds of thousands of people, he does not stand on that stage long. He moves around the audience, right? Because then he becomes, in your brain, he becomes more relatable. He becomes more like one of you because he's around you and he's feeling that energy from you as he's moving around that place. Think about in your presentation, do you have to stand up at the board? Can you where your deck is, or can you move around sometimes? Maybe you need to start at certain points, but maybe then you move to the other side of the room, or, making eye contact with more than just a couple of people in the audience can also be powerful. Sometimes we hone in on somebody that makes us feel comfortable, but they're not moving our eyes to look at some of the other folks in the room. So just think about that. And all of this stuff, you can't be in your head with it too much. You just have to practice. The more you practice this stuff, get feedback from people, and the more you watch other people's presentations, the better you get at this stuff as well. Watch everybody you can. And if it's not within your organization, watch other people's pitches. If you can, watch, if you're doing conference talks, watch other TED Talks online. You can watch a million of them now and see how people do it and start to just take the best of the best. The other piece is there's some great literature out there on the different kinds of archetypal stories, like the hero's journey is one that I talked about, but there's other stories like fish out of water story is another one. Like these kind of archetypes that make for good stories because our brain is used to these in our own lives and these working. And so if you use those kinds of archetypes, and you can, in our storytelling playbook, we include those kind of archetypal story examples so you can see. Another good example is just do role playing with your salespeople. If you're doing role playing, then they're having to share these stories and their examples with your pretend clients. It's really powerful because then you can see where people can cut or what part of the story is the most impactful. Tatiana, anything I'm forgetting or any other ideas you got?
I just wanted to add on to the role play or have practice, because I think especially seasoned salespeople they'll know the objections and they can play into those so that they can help someone really maneuver their ways through some of the objections, some of the questions, so that they have some practice in that and they don't get riled by, this is an objection I've never heard before.
I love it. Yes. And then you do start to do that for each other. And then those client calls become much, much easier. I love it. That's a great one. All right. We are going to continue this work on story. Like I said, Tatiana, what are the other episodes numbers that people can go back and listen to?
Episode 8 is the storytelling workshop. It's all the way back at the beginning of our podcasting journey. It's from 2023.
Oh my goodness.
I know. Can you imagine? It's been so long. And that's the only one that I have that's official storytelling. There are other ones that have...
With Diane and Ingrid, we did one.
Oh, that one is episode 41. That one is from May 2024.
Okay. So if you're interested in this idea of storytelling, first go back to episodes 8 and episodes 41.
Yes, and I'll put those in the description.
You can download the Storytelling Playbook if you're interested. This playbook is specifically for sales and for client presentations. And then also we're going to dig into this topic even more because it's so important for your success and your company's success. And it's fun. We like to do it as humans. So enjoy it. And that enjoyment will also produce money for you, but also produce a lot of camaraderie between your staff and clients, and also just between your staff and you. So enjoy. Tell some stories.
Before you close out, Christine, I think we should do another episode on using AI in leadership. I was going to jump in when you were talking about AI and like, oh, I think people should know how to log in. And I was just like, oh, I think maybe we should do our whole episode on how to use AI. Because I think people talk about AI and then people don't know where to even start. Yeah, I think it would be a good episode in how we can use stories on how we use it.
Great idea.
Ourselves. Yeah.
Great idea. So we will do that. Put a little note for that. If you have other ideas or questions, always feel free to write to us and we'll get another episode going. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.